the choices we make will serve us well or serve to forsake us. Can we fly? Can we fly? Who will we be? Who will we be when the days come to be free? Will we fly? Will we fly? Will we fly? Time will tell if all the people in the world will value compassion over greed. Will we fly? Please pass me a pill to numb the pain that numbs my will. It's all so surreal to me. Thousands killed, I've seen it on my TV. Oh, what's this life for anyway? I'm so bored with the same old conversation. What you say? But if I check in, I just might check out. Who will we be? Can we even dream it? A God we can believe in, or even real live angels? Will we fly, or will we die? Because it's too much to care, and it's way too hard to try. Time will tell what's real and make-believe. Money and entitlement in a world without compassion. Or can we dream John Lennon's imagination? All the people living life in peace. Who will we be? Can we even dream it? Will we be the God we can believe in, or even real live angels? Will we fly, or will we die? Because it's too much to care, and it's way too hard to try. Or will we fly? Or will we fly?
Thank you, Gabi, and welcome to Face to Face. Today I'm with Dennis, and we're going to talk about nonviolence. We're going to talk about nonviolence beyond direct action. And so you have been involved in nonviolence for many, many years.
Many years, probably about 25 years.
Okay.
Sort of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Trying to practice it.
Okay. And because for you it's not just an action or a style of activity you do on the street or boycott type of things. It's much more than this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most people are familiar with nonviolence in terms of that, in terms of actions like what Gandhi did in India, or what King did with the civil rights movement, in terms of a very specific action in front of violence, which is very interesting. It's an interesting tactic. But even, if you read and you study even the works of people like King and Gandhi, and a lot of their realizations were that the tactic in and of itself was useful and helpful, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough in actually sort of changing the conditions that led to the violence that they were sort of fighting against in the first place.
Yeah.
And the ones who did it, who really sort of understood it, really started talking more about nonviolence as as an attitude, as a position in front of life.
And they were very spiritual themselves. I mean, King and Gandhi were very, very spiritual.
They came back from that, and it had a lot to do with a sort of internal unity. I think they both sort of recognized and talked about, Gandhi in particular talked a lot about nonviolence being sort of the natural state of the human being, that it was this sort of internal unity that people had, and the sort of nonviolent approach was really sort of a return to that sort of inherent nature of people. And it's really about trying to develop an attitude that's aware that is not just opposed to violence, but also begins to sort of understand the roots of violence. Where does violence come from?
Yeah, because you cannot resolve it. You have to transform the base to be able to give another type of responses.
And I think it's sort of inherent in the word itself, but you really can't talk about non-violence unless you really start talking about violence. And for most of us, when violence is talked about or when violence is sort of addressed, it's really in terms of the physical violence, which in most cases is sort of it's the ultimate form. Exactly. It's sort of like the last manifestation of violence. And so for us, we've talked a lot about looking at the other forms of violence. A lot of them were precursors to the physical violence, the economic violence, the religious violence, the racial violence, the discrimination that people sort of live as part of people's daily life, that usually gets to a point and it erupts into some sort of physical violence.
But today we are never talking about economical violence. I mean, it's amazing because it's really, it drives the whole world in such a hardship. And I will say all the wars that we know right now are mainly caused by economical violence. So it's and it's not really a non-violence answer to any of this. It's mainly, wars and
well, that's
conflict.
The whole thing, because the violence is responded to with another form of violence, and that's basically the principle of non-violence. Is the first thing is you don't respond with another form of violence. You just sort of, by doing that, you're just continuing to sort of feed this cycle. And that's where sort of an understanding of it. I think it would be fascinating to turn on the news at night and, they're very clear to indicate the forms of physical violence that are going on. But how interesting to have a newscaster talked about this, a form of economic violence that we saw today. And,
absolutely.
And in here, this moral violence was being detailed, and so-and-so was a victim of psychological violence. And it'll be very interesting, I think, for us also to begin to recognize it and to talk about it in that way, to be able to talk about feeling a victim of psychological violence, or beginning to talk about how we're all sort of victims of the economic violence that goes on, and how do we see it being played out, and how do we see it affecting people.
And the repercussion, I mean, how does the cascade to other type of situation and neighborhoods? I mean, and I think in some conflict or some form of discrimination, it takes generation and generation to transform the landscape of people who have born in very hardship situation and missing education or missing access to resources and so on and so forth. So, but if you had a recommendation to someone who want to start how do you start to behave non-violent? How do you?
I mean, I think there's you start with the desire. Every change starts with a desire to change. And I think it's sort of recognizing that the way that we're doing things is not working. And as an individual, I always sort of have to start with that own sort of personal failure. The way I'm doing it is not working. This is not leading me to be where I am. This is not the type of person I want to be. And from there, I think from there begins a search where you begin to start looking, you start being a little bit more attentive, a little bit more mindful. And what I was talking about before, that idea of being able to sort of identify, and even in your own life, to see how you're impacted by the different forms of violence and how you reciprocate, how very often we're conditioned just to respond back with another form of violence. In these little injustices.
Really where the complication is. In some way, the non-violence is to stop to act with violence. It's breaking the mechanisms
of that mechanical thing.
Mechanical things.
Beginning to be a little bit more conscious of your actions, beginning to start thinking about acting with intentionality.
Yeah.
And you know, in daily life, these are the type of things that once you start to do that, I think we're amazed at the decisions that we make, the actions we take, the actions we don't take in our daily life that have those kinds of repercussions. I was coming here on the train tonight, and there was in the corner of the train a homeless person who was quite disheveled and in a state, and it was amazing how I got onto the train, and you know, half the car was packed into this end, just sort of isolating. Yeah. And at one point, this person just walked down and sat down just 2 feet on the same bench away from him.
And everybody moved.
And well, it just you know, an action like that is, to me, is a quite a beautiful form of nonviolence. This person of just sort of saying, you know, you're not even aware. There's a physical sort of repulsion that people have, but they're not even aware of the repercussions of that action on this person, on other people in the train as well. So just that person doing that simple action just transformed something in the train, and you could see. And there were some people who didn't catch it, but there were quite a few people who just were quite moved, and it
So how do you find the courage to do this type of, to be on that type of person in that type of situation? Where do you get this standing to?
I think, you know, when, again, I sort of think about when you read the works of King or Gandhi and people who we consider so courageous, they all talk about it as almost not being. It was more like something they felt they needed to do, and I think all of us go to in those situations in our life where we sort of say something has to change, and you start to take little actions, and there's a sense of growing coherence that gives people strength. When people do something that makes them, that they feel is right, that makes them feel like it's aligned with how they're thinking and feeling, they feel good, and it produces a sense of wanting to repeat it. And I think a lot of the people who have been able to sort of make those kind of things come from those small steps that they're, over time, are able to keep repeating with more action and more force.
But the first step, it's
First step is the most difficult. It always is. I think we do this every day. I think that's the other thing. I think it's not, you know, this action on the subway, which was quite dramatic, but we do it in every day. We do those kinds of actions. So I don't think it's so much about trying to start something. I think it's trying to be aware of what we're already doing. Yeah. And why is it we do those things? Yeah. And how do we begin to?
But the media and the press are not helping in any shape or form because they are propagging the violence. I mean,
exactly.
If you see New York, I mean, you have millions of people live together just fine.
Sure.
And then sometimes.
But there's also amazing number of. I mean, even just today, we were in a meeting this morning with a young woman who's organizing her community in her church.
That's true.
And I went back to work, and there was someone working with trying to keep funding going for this LGBT senior center because it's the only place they have to go. And I had this action on the subway tonight. Yeah. This program is a form of nonviolence. Yeah. So that's what I mean. I think we're doing it. And I think part of it is we have to help each other to identify that.
Yeah, but we are not recognizing it, then we are doing
That's
it.
That's what I'm saying. We have to help each other to identify that this is a form. Yeah. One of the things that's fascinating to me is this thing of how do we build a culture of nonviolence, right? It's something that I've talked about for a while. And I think part of that is just that, beginning to label this and beginning to help people recognizing that they're already doing a lot of things that are going in that direction.
A stamp or made with nonviolence.
Made with nonviolence, exactly.
That would be fantastic.
I did a nonviolent act today. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah. That's the show for today, the Face to Face.